We'll now cross live to the UK's Chatham House, where Professor Yakubu Mahmood, chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, is addressing Nigerians on INEC's preparations and plans to ensure electoral integrity and inclusivity in the forthcoming general elections.
Huge undertaking. The delimitation details are simply staggering. 93.4 million registered voters expected to elect their representatives in 1,491 constituencies spread across 176,846 polling units. Based on the figures we compiled from the websites of various electoral commissions and interior ministries in West Africa, Nigeria's current voter population is 16.7 million, higher than the 76.7 million registered voters in all the other countries put together, and there are 14 other countries in the sub-region. This means that a general election in Nigeria is like conducting elections in the whole of West Africa and beyond. Secondly, Nigeria's election is not a one-day activity. There will be national elections followed by state elections. National elections, that is presidential election and elections to the two houses of assembly, the Senate and the House of Representatives, will hold on Saturday, 25th February 2023. On that day, voters will elect the president and 469 legislators made up of 109 senators and 360 members of the House of Representatives. State elections will hold 2 weeks later on Saturday, 11th March 2023, to elect 28 out of 36 state governors and 993 members of state houses of assembly. I say 28 governors because in 8 states the elections are conducted off-cycle because of previous litigations. So we have already conducted those elections, the last being Ekiti and Osun in June and July last year. Thirdly, the 2023 general election will be the 7th consecutive general election in Nigeria since the restoration of democracy in 1999. And this is the longest period of electoral democracy in the country's history. Previous efforts, as we very well know, were repeatedly truncated by military interventions. In approaching the subject matter assigned to me by Chatham House, my lecture is divided into 3 broad areas. The first one is lessons from the 2019 general election. The second, preparations for the 2023 general election, looking at early planning, the electoral legal framework, voter registration and permanent voters cards, election technology, expansion of voter access to polling units, inclusivity, recruitment and training of election staff, interagency collaboration and support, and finally, electoral operations and logistics. Number 3, issues and challenges such as the prevailing insecurity and its impact on the election generally, attacks on INEC facilities nationwide, violence during electioneering campaign, vote buying, electoral litigation and adjudication, prosecution of electoral offenses, and for many in this hall, the nagging question of diaspora voting. Now, these wide-ranging issues cannot be covered in detail, if at all, within the 20 minutes, or if Alex is flexible, 20 long minutes, which may be 25 or 30, that I have for my presentation. I will therefore highlight the more critical issues so that we can have more time for discussion. Actually, that's the part I like best, the discussion. I have prepared a 23-page lecture, a copy of which will be given to the organizers and will also be uploaded to the INEC website immediately after the presentation and discussion. Lessons from the 2019 general election. Preparations for the 2023 general election are largely being concluded and preliminary deployments already underway. Indeed, our preparations began quite early one important lesson from 2019 is that early preparations for election provide opportunities for adequate planning, acquisition, and testing of systems. A second lesson from the 2019 election is that early choice of election technology management tools, especially the main election technology, is very critical for success. Their proper pilot testing and deployment are exceedingly important for a successful election. For election technology, early decision is central to maintaining its integrity, popularizing it among voters, and addressing any challenges that could arise. We know that political actors often try to undermine the process by attacking the technology, casting doubts on its suitability, bypassing its use, or indeed seeking to undermine its security. This informed the early choice of a new voter accreditation technology using an electronic device called the bimodal voter accreditation system. We have tested it in several by-elections and off-cycle governorship elections. In addition, the decision to make polling unit election results available for public viewing, which has always been a major demand by citizens and election observers, falls into this early choice of election technology. The INEC Results Viewing Portal, the IREV, is a dedicated web portal for the public view of polling unit results as soon as they are finalized on election day. This has been employed in several elections conducted by the Commission in the past few years. In particular, the uploading of polling unit results to the IREV portal has been deployed in 105 constituencies where the Commission conducted off-season elections since August 2020. The result can still be viewed on the portal, making the IREV an invaluable repository of election results in Nigeria. It is actually our biggest archives for election results. And citizens and anybody who registers on the portal can still view the results for all the 105 constituencies. And I kept asking those who care to approach the Commission that what we have been doing is to upload the scanned images of polling unit results, and the same hard copy is given to party agents at polling units on election day. And I've consistently asked candidates and politicians to compare the results on the IREV portal with the hard copies brought by their polling agents from the polling units. And I asked them if there were discrepancies. It's 99.99% accurate, and the results are still there on the IREV portal. Now, a further lesson from the 2019 general election, which is helping us immensely in our preparations for 2023, is that an early finalization of changes to the Electoral Act, the principal legal basis for elections, is critical to proper organization of elections. In the build-up to the 2019 general election, there was an unending back and forth between the executive and legislative arms of government on the Electoral Act. And in the end, the amendment was stalled. And one consequence of this was that INEC could not conclude work on the regulations and guidelines for the election, which are meant to drive from and be consistent with the Electoral Act as early as we intended. Since the Commission has no say as such in the passing of the Act, it had to wait for a final document to emerge from the process, which ultimately did not materialize. The several recommendations that the Commission made to the National Assembly to include them in the amended Act to improve the quality of elections, such as the strengthening of the use of technology, early conclusion of candidates' nomination, as well as the timely funding of elections, never ultimately became law. It is noteworthy that this time around, the Electoral Act 2022 was passed in good time, and it has addressed some of the issues and challenges we encountered in 2019. The last lesson from the 2019 general election is funding. and early release of funds to the Commission, which are also very important to well-organized elections, and partly because of delays in finalizing the electoral legal framework for the 2019 general election, finalizing the budget for the election, and arranging a good schedule for fund releases to the Commission. All this was rather tardy and challenging to the Commission. And to add to the pressure on the Commission, there were over 14 million more voters to cater for in 2019 compared to 2015. It required painstaking and prolonged engagements with the Commission, and both the executive, within the Commission and between the executive and the legislative arms of government, for us to make some headway. And given that practically all activities for the elections depended on funds, printing of ballot papers, the result sheets, to hiring of election staff and transport providers, the Commission could not meet many of its targets in preparing for the 2019 general elections. So, learning from this experience, what have we been doing to make sure that 2023 is better than 2019? The first point to make is election planning. And learning from the 2019 general election, a great deal of forward planning and engagements have been undertaken, and many aspects of our preparations attest to that. First, we concluded the new 4-year strategic plan and strategic program of action, as well as the 2023 election project plan, over 18 months prior to the date set for the election. So these planning tools were ready 18 months ahead of the elections, which gave us a very good start. Then the Electoral Act. Elections are essentially anchored in law, and unlike the case with the 2019 general election, new Electoral Act was signed into law on Friday, 25th February 2022, exactly 1 year ahead of the general election, giving time for both the Commission and all stakeholders to fully acquaint themselves with the challenges in their responsibilities and functions. As an affirmation of our readiness for the general election, the Commission released a timetable and schedule of activities the following day after the law was assented to. It went into force after it was assented to by the President. The following day, on Saturday, 26 February 2022, the Commission released the timetable and schedule of activities. It contains 14 activities to be implemented from the publication of notice of poll to election day. And I'm happy to say that the Commission has accomplished so far 11 out of the 14 activities for the election, and all of them on schedule. So there are only 3 activities outstanding. The new law contains some very important changes that hold the potentials for improving the quality of Nigeria's election. I've identified 10 most important provisions in the new law, but time will not permit me to go through all the 10. But they are all listed in the lecture, which, as I said, will be made available immediately after today's session. Related to the Electoral Act are the regulations and guidelines. The Commission has powers under the law to come up with regulations and guidelines to govern the conduct of election, drawing from the provisions of the Constitution and the Electoral Act. The Constitution cannot be expected to say everything. So members of the National Assembly, drawing from their powers under the Constitution, make subsidiary legislation. And then, in turn, even members of the National Assembly, through subsidiary legislation, cannot say everything about the conduct of elections. And in turn, they donated part of their powers to the Commission to make regulations and guidelines. Together, the 3 instruments are called the Electoral Legal Framework. So very quickly, for want of time, what have we been doing about perhaps the most important foundation for democratic elections, the registration of voters? You can't have a credible elections without credible register of voters. That is critical. Now, this has been a major component of our preparations for the election. The law requires the Commission to conduct voter registration on a continuous basis. However, the law also provides dates for suspension of the process to prepare for general election. Consequently, continuous voter registration, as we call it in Nigeria, or the CVR, was suspended on the 31st of July 2022 to resume after the general election. And I'm sure you must have heard about the provision of the law as to whether it is 90 days or not later than 90 days. I would leave it at that. If we have time, we can discuss it. There are some words used by the legal draftsmen that give the Commission flexibility. Sometimes it's not later than, sometimes it's not earlier than, sometimes it's on a particular date. But if there is time, we can take this up during discussion. The CVR, as I said, was suspended on the 31st of July, and in 1 year, from the 21st of June to the 31st of July, 12.2 million new voters were registered, out of which 9.5 million were validated after a thorough cleaning up of the data. We believe that the enthusiasm, especially among young people, was partly responsible for this surge, but they are also motivated, we believe, by the innovation of online pre-registration introduced by the Commission. For the first time, we introduced the online pre-registration of voters, where citizens can commence the process online, but they have to go to the physical or designated registration centers to conclude the process. This enabled intending registrants to commence the process online from a dedicated portal, book an appointment on the same portal, and finally appear in person at an INEC office to have their biometrics taken. The cleanup of the register was painstakingly conducted by the Commission because the automated biometric identification system, the ABIS, before now the Commission used the AFIS, the fingerprint identification system. But this time around we use the ABIS, meaning both fingerprint and facial. And that is what we're also using to accredit voters on election day. And all these innovations were all the work of INEC's own engineers in-house in the Commission. The machines may have been fabricated outside the country, but the design of the machines were done by our own engineers in-house. In fact, one of them said they are going to introduce a new biometric using body odor. I said, please, not yet. Let's make haste slowly. But when he explained it to me, it sounded logical. He said, don't laugh, Chairman, because I said body odor is also a biometric. He said, how does your dog recognize you? It's from your body odor. And that's why if another person walks to the house, it barks. When you move into the house, it wags its tail because it recognizes your body odor. I said, but for elections, let's wait, not now. So we use the ABIS to clean up the register. But also, there is something that is perhaps peculiarly Nigerian. Who owns the register of voters? It's the people of Nigeria. The law says that when we finish registering new voters, we should add them to the existing register of voters, meaning that the 9.5 million that we cleaned up after the last CVR should be added to the 84 million registered voters for the 2019 general election, and then subjected to scrutiny, claims, and objections by Nigerians. And this requires the printing of hard copies of the register and displaying same in 8,809 wards and 774 local government areas. For that alone, we printed over 9 million pages for that exercise. So at community level, citizens can look at the register, tell us, are there ineligible persons on the register? Persons who, by virtue of age, are not supposed to be on the register? or citizenship, or the deceased, or multiple registrants. Again, because of the Electoral Act 2022, we did something that doesn't avail. We published the entire National Register of Voters on our website. And citizens had access to them, and you probably saw on the social media how they're picking up pictures of people all over and saying all manner of things on the social media. Now, the purpose of claims and objections is that people whose names have been misspelled or their personal details, or they have realized that there are some people that shouldn't be on the register, it was their responsibility to inform the commission. And there is a procedure for making these complaints. At the end of the exercise, over 53,000 names were annulled from the register as a result, essentially, of citizens' action. I want to say this, that the National Register of Voters in Nigeria is the largest database of citizens in Africa. And we believe that the core of it is solid. But like every database, it's not perfect. And we'll continue to work to improve on that database. One of the complaints we received arising from the claims and objections said that there were underage voters in 15 states, and they submitted an 138-page document. And personally, I took time to study the document, line by line, blow by blow. They identified 21,000 plus in eligible registrants in the 15 states. And so I asked them, is that all you have identified? They said, that's all that they have identified. But in the 15 states, there are 37 million registered voters. So the 21,000, in terms of percentage, comes to 0.06% of 37 million, meaning that 99.94% of the register is solid. So we'll continue to engage citizens on this. And as I said, once the backbone of the register is solid, then all we need to do is to continuously update. Some of you may be aware, as Nigerians, that with every general election until 2010, voters were asked to register afresh. But with the introduction of the biometric register in 2010-2011, we are only asking those who have come of age or did not register before to register. Not every Nigerian is called out to register. But as you can see, the number has been increasing from about 70 million in 2015 to 84 million in 2019 to 93 million for 2023. And who knows what the register of voters will be next election in 2027. So Nigerian law requires that voters must possess the voter's card, what we call the permanent voters' cards or the PVCs, to be able to vote. And following the cleaning up of the register, the cards for both new and old voters, the law said that even if your name is misspelled during the CVR, go and get a new card. INEC will correct the misspelling and print a new card for you. So we have reprinted those PVCs and we have made them available for collection. When we started making the cards available for collection, we operated at the level of the local government area 774. We later devolved the collection to 8,809 wards. Only last week, we extended the collection at ward level and overall also extended the collection until the 29th of this month. However, the process is still ongoing and is going to go on, and we're encouraged by the kind of numbers we are seeing. The figures I received yesterday from Lagos shows that over 600,000 cards have been collected in the last 1 month alone in Lagos. Lagos has the highest number of registered voters, but by the same token also the largest number of uncollected cards in the country. But probably now with what is happening, the largest number of collected cards in the country. And we have warned our staff because we have had so many complaints in the field, bottlenecks having to do with sundry allegations of extortion by our own staff. We'll investigate and deal with it. Or inducement by some people, registered voters, induce the officials. Please, I don't want to waste my time hanging around. Take this. Here is my temporary voter's card. Here is my telephone number. As soon as my card is available, call me. This one is also illegal, and the Commission is prepared to deal with it. And then we also had complaints about discriminatory issuance of PVCs in some locations. And these are allegations that we're also going to deal with. In fact, we have already issued a circular to all our state offices. The resident electoral commissioners should keep their eyes on these processes to ensure that every registered voter gets his or her card, but there will be no collection by proxy. That's why we have moved away from collection, from distribution to collection. If we were to distribute, all the cards will go. In 1 week, all the cards will leave INEC office, but they may end up in the wrong hands. But we are putting the onus on the registered voter to collect his or her card. So the emphasis is not on distribution of cards, but on collection of cards. Next, I go to what many of you are interested in, I'm sure, hearing from the Commission, and that is on election technology. Now, in order to avoid the usual challenges with the application of new technologies, the Commission introduced and tested our innovations for election early enough. There are 3 critical components. The first one is the INEC voter enrollment device. It's called the IVED, for improved registration of voters. It's the same beavers, but when we register voters, there are peripherals we add. We add the fingerprint scanner and a thermal printer. So that we can register, take the fingerprints, and also print the temporary card. Then we have the INEC bimodal voter accreditation system for both voter accreditation and transmission of results for collation, and then the IREV, the INEC Result Viewing Portal, to offer public access so that citizens can view results at polling units as the processes conclude. IVED has been deployed in the recent CVR, and as I said, we have 93.4 million registered voters, of which 37 million, that's 39.5%, are young people, young Nigerians between the ages of 18 and 34. And then they are closely followed by 33.4 million, or 35.75% middle-aged voters between the ages of 35 and 49. Put together, these 2 categories constitute 75.39% of registered voters in Nigeria. So actually the 2023 election is the election of the young people, because they have the numbers. Even the majority of the PVCs collected actually are collected by young people. So out of the 93.4 million, 70.4 million registered voters are between the ages of 18 and 49. Already their PVCs, as I said, are available and are being collected, and the collection of the cards will end on the 29th of January. We have to end it because before the election, we'll publish the number of PVCs collected on polling unit by polling unit basis nationwide. So I'll skip the other thing about electoral operations and logistics, but let me go to inclusivity before I round up, inclusivity and diaspora voting. Our commission remains fully committed to making Nigerian elections inclusive Inclusive elections constitute an essential part of democracy. And that's the reason why in our commission we regularly speak of our commitment to free, fair, credible, transparent, verifiable, and inclusive elections. And over the years, we have worked with various stakeholders to increase the participation of young people and women. Participation in the process, it may not necessarily be participation in elective offices. Under our constitution, no one can contest election unless and until he or she is sponsored by a political party. And we have been engaging with the political parties to see what we can do together in that respect. And then the work of the Not Too Young to Run movement did a lot in reducing the age requirement for contesting some electoral positions, which actually underscores the Commission's youth policy. In addition, the Commission has a gender policy introduced way back in 2012 to guide or provide a fairer working environment for women in the Commission and in the electoral process, and we remain committed to these policies. But in addition to that, we have been engaging with the disability community nationwide. Only last week, we met with Inclusive Friends and the Albino Foundation, and we are going to be providing a lot of assistive devices, both as a requirement of the law and as a practice. The albinos complained that we should help them to be able to see the logos of the political parties on the ballot papers better. And so we introduced magnifying glasses. For the blind that could read Braille, we introduced Braille jacket. And then for the deaf, they said they could see and they didn't need those assistive devices. They asked what
and that is Mahmoud Jaga, the INEC chairman. And that is Yakubu Jaga, the Yakubu Mahmoud, the INEC chairman, speaking at the famed think tank Chatham House in the UK, sharing the progress of INEC with a 23-page lecture centered on 3 areas of concentration for the upcoming elections in February, all of which will be prepared and uploaded to the INEC website. The areas discussed centered on the preparations, planning, and testing of the system's election technology management tools, pilot testing and deployment of these technologies, and of course the advancement of election technology and the likes. Also the identifying and ironing out of issues and challenges, including the increased insecurity and attacks, violence, vote buying, and election adjudication.